June 20th, 1947, 810 North Linden Drive, Beverly Hills. Benjamin Siegel sat on a chintz sofa in Virginia Hill's living room, reading the Los Angeles Times. The evening was warm. The windows were open. At approximately 9:45 p.m., 9 rounds from a .30 caliber military carbine came through the front window. 4 struck him in the head and torso. He died instantly. The newspaper was still in his hand. When police arrived, they found no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no witnesses who would speak. The shooter had fired from the rose garden, distance approximately 15 feet, then vanished into the night. Beverly Hills detectives cataloged the scene with methodical precision. Blood spatter patterns, bullet trajectory, shell casings in the garden soil. But the forensic detail only confirmed what everyone already knew. This was not a robbery, not a crime of passion. This was an execution. Within 20 minutes of the shooting, before the body was even removed, 3 men walked into the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. They carried no weapons, no court orders. They simply informed the management that ownership had changed. The transfer was immediate, undisputed, institutional. The timing was not coincidental. This documentary uses court records, FBI files, witness testimony, and archival sources to reconstruct Bugsy Siegel's rise and fall. Some dialogue is based on documented accounts. Where evidence is incomplete, we say so. The newspapers called him Bugsy, a nickname he despised. They described him as a gangster, a ladies' man, a Hollywood hanger-on who got in over his head. But that version, colorful, cinematic, convenient, misses the architecture beneath. Benjamin Siegel was not a reckless dreamer. He was a founding member of Murder Incorporated, a Syndicate board member, a man trusted to carry out the organization's most irreversible decisions. And for nearly 20 years, he had been untouchable. So what changed? Why did the Syndicate, an organization he helped build, decide he had to die? The answer lies not in Hollywood myth, but in accounting. Not in personality, but in power structure. And it begins long before Las Vegas, in Brooklyn. Benjamin Siegel was born February 28, 1906, in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. His parents, Max and Jenny, were Jewish immigrants from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They ran a small shop. The family lived above it. The neighborhood was dense, poor, and divided along ethnic lines: Italian, Irish, Jewish. Each block had its own economy, its own rules. And young Benjamin learned early that respect was not given. It was taken. Sometime around 1918, he met Mayor Lansky. Lansky was small, bookish, physically unimposing. Siegel was the opposite: athletic, volatile, handsome. But they recognized in each other something rare: ambition married to discipline. According to FBI records, by age 16 they were running a protection racket targeting street vendors. By 18 they controlled gambling operations across 3 boroughs. It was not a gang. It was a business. A federal prosecutor once asked Mayor Lansky to describe his relationship with Siegel. Lansky's answer was precise.
Ben and I understood each other. We came from the same streets. We knew what it meant to be hungry, and we agreed on one thing: we would never be hungry again.
By the late 1920s, prohibition had transformed American organized crime. What had been neighborhood operations became interstate supply chains, liquor importation, distribution networks. Enforcement. Lansky and Siegel became essential to what would later be called the National Crime Syndicate, a coalition of Jewish and Italian mobsters who agreed to replace ethnic warfare with coordinated profit. The architects included Lansky, Siegel, Charles Lucky, Luciano, and Frank Costello, and they needed an enforcement mechanism. Murder Incorporated was not a formal name. It was a press invention, but the organization it described was real. A group of contract killers based in Brownsville, Brooklyn, available to syndicate leadership for disciplinary actions. Benjamin Siegel was not just a client. He was one of its operators. FBI files document his involvement in multiple contract killings between 1930 and 1937. The targets were not civilians. They were syndicate members who had violated internal rules, skimmed money, spoke to authorities, betrayed trust. This is where the myth and the man begin to separate. Hollywood would later frame Siegel as a charming rogue, a dreamer, a visionary who just wanted to build something. But the documentary record, wiretaps, witness testimony, forensic evidence shows something colder. He was an enforcer, a killer, a man who understood that the syndicate's entire economy rested on the credible threat of irreversible violence. And for years, he delivered that threat without hesitation. By 1937, law enforcement pressure in New York was intensifying. District Attorney Thomas Dewey had begun dismantling syndicate operations, wiretaps, raids, grand jury subpoenas. The organization needed new geography. California, with its gambling ships, racetracks, and Hollywood money, offered opportunity. And Benjamin Siegel, with his looks and charm, was the logical choice to open the territory. A retired FBI agent who tracked Siegel's movements described the transition.
Siegel wasn't sent to Los Angeles to hide. He was sent to build, to establish the syndicate's presence on the West Coast, to make connections with local politicians, union leaders, and entertainment figures. He wasn't running. He was expanding.
In 1937, Benjamin Siegel arrived in Los Angeles and did something unusual for a mobster. He rented a mansion in Beverly Hills. He joined a country club. He had his teeth fixed. He cultivated friendships with actors, studio executives, and directors. He was seen at Cyro's nightclub, at Santa Anita racetrack, at private parties in the Hollywood Hills. And the Hollywood community, accustomed to reinvention, to people with invented pasts, welcomed him. Publicly, Siegel presented himself as a businessman, a sportsman, a man of refinement. Privately, he was building the syndicate's West Coast infrastructure, offshore gambling ships, wire services for bookmakers, narcotics importation routes, union infiltration. FBI surveillance logs from this period show a man living two lives simultaneously and maintaining both with discipline. He became genuinely close with actors like George Raft and Cary Grant. They were not mob associates. They were friends. Raft, himself from a rough New York background, saw Siegel as authentic, charismatic, someone who had made it on his own terms. What Raft didn't see, or chose not to, was the violence that funded the lifestyle. A studio executive who knew Siegel socially later gave testimony.
Ben was charming, impeccably dressed. He could talk about horses, about film production, about politics. You'd never know what he really was. And maybe that was the point. Maybe he was trying to become something else.
In 1941, Siegel met Virginia Hill. She was a former Alabama beauty queen who had become a courier and associate for the Chicago outfit. She understood the world he came from. She asked no questions about his business, and she became both his lover and, according to FBI reports, a financial intermediary for Syndicate funds. Their relationship was volatile, public, glamorous, and it would later place her at the center of the investigation into his death. Here was the central tension of Siegel's Hollywood years. He wanted the legitimacy, the social acceptance, the glamour of high society, but he funded it with syndicate rackets, with violence, with the same structures he'd built in Brooklyn. He believed he could inhabit both worlds indefinitely. The syndicate believed otherwise. By 1945, the syndicate was looking for new revenue streams. Wartime prosperity had created a gambling boom, but East Coast operations faced constant legal pressure. Nevada had legalized casino gambling in 1931, but outside of Reno, the infrastructure was minimal. Las Vegas was a desert railroad town, population 8,000. Mayor Lansky saw potential, a city where gambling was legal, where casinos could operate openly, without police raids or payoffs. And he asked Benjamin Siegel to explore it. Years later, Lansky described the initial vision.
We weren't thinking about what Las Vegas became. We were thinking about a legal operation, a place where we could run a clean casino and not worry about the cops shutting us down. Ben understood the assignment, but somewhere along the way, he lost sight of whose money he was spending.
In 1945, Siegel took over a stalled casino project on the Los Angeles Highway south of downtown Las Vegas. The original developer had run out of money. The syndicate bought the site and asked Siegel to finish it. The plan was modest: a small casino, a hotel, a restaurant, budget $1 million. But Siegel had a different vision. He renamed the project the Flamingo, reportedly after Virginia Hill's nickname, and he began expanding the design. He wanted luxury suites, a showroom, a swimming pool, air conditioning in every room, imported fixtures, the finest materials available. He was not building a desert casino. He was building a monument. Construction costs spiraled immediately. Wartime material shortages drove up prices. Contractors inflated invoices. Some materials disappeared from the site and were sold on the black market. According to FBI financial analysis, Siegel was either unable or unwilling to control the bleeding. By mid-1946, the budget had doubled, then tripled. The syndicate demanded explanations. A contractor who worked on the Flamingo later testified before a Nevada gaming commission.
Ben wanted everything perfect. If a tile wasn't right, rip it out and start over. If the wood grain didn't match, replace it. He didn't care what it cost. And some of us, I'll be honest, we took advantage of that.
By late 1946, the Flamingo had consumed over $5 million in syndicate funds. Mayor Lansky flew to Las Vegas to inspect the site personally. What he found was a construction zone, incomplete rooms, unfinished infrastructure, no clear timeline for opening, and Siegel, according to witnesses, defensive, dismissive, insistent that the vision required patience. The syndicate ordered Siegel to open the casino by the end of the year, finished or not. He chose December 26, 1946. It was a catastrophic decision. The Flamingo's opening night was designed to be a spectacle. Jimmy Durante performed. Xavier Cugat's orchestra played. Hollywood celebrities were flown in. But the hotel rooms weren't finished. Guests had to stay elsewhere. The showroom wasn't complete. The restaurant was barely functional. And worst of all, the casino lost money. High rollers won heavily at the tables. Some suspected the games were rigged in the players' favor, either through incompetence or sabotage. A casino manager present that night later described the atmosphere.
It was chaos. The dealers weren't trained. The cashiers didn't know the procedures, and Ben was walking around like everything was perfect while the money was flying out the door. You could feel it in the room. This wasn't a grand opening. This was a disaster.
2 weeks later, Siegel shut the Flamingo down. Officially, it was for renovations. Unofficially, it was because the Syndicate refused to provide more operating capital until he could prove the casino was viable. He had built a palace in the desert, but he had not built a profitable business. The Syndicate operated on cold arithmetic. Money invested, money returned, profit margin, timeline. Siegel had consumed over $6 million. He had produced a closed casino and a trail of debts, and there were whispers never proven that he had skimmed funds, that Virginia Hill had deposited Syndicate money in Swiss bank accounts. Whether true or not, the suspicion was enough. In early 1947, Syndicate leadership convened in Havana, Cuba. Mayor Lansky, Frank Costello, Charles Luciano, and others. The subject, Benjamin Siegel. According to multiple accounts, Lansky defended him, argued for patience, pointed out that Siegel had been loyal for 20 years, but the consensus was clear. Siegel had mismanaged Syndicate funds. He had ignored warnings. He had become a liability. And in the Syndicate's internal logic, there was only one remedy. Between March and June 1947, Benjamin Siegel reopened the Flamingo. He fired staff. He tightened procedures. He spent 14-hour days on the casino floor, watching every table, every transaction. And slowly, the numbers began to improve. By May, the casino was turning a small profit. Siegel believed he could save himself with accounting. If he could demonstrate profitability, if he could show that the Flamingo would eventually recoup the Syndicate's investment, he would be safe. He sent financial reports to Lansky. He requested more time. He promised returns. He did not understand that the decision had already been made. An FBI wiretap from May 1947 captured a conversation between two Syndicate associates. The transcript, declassified decades later, is chilling.
Ben thinks numbers will save him. He doesn't get it. This isn't about the money anymore. It's about respect. It's about what happens when you stop listening.
In mid-June 1947, Siegel flew to Los Angeles. Virginia Hill left for Europe the same week, a trip FBI agents later believed was orchestrated to remove her from the scene. Siegel stayed at her Beverly Hills mansion. He met with attorneys. He reviewed financial documents. He made phone calls to Las Vegas. He behaved, according to surveillance logs, like a man who believed he still had a future. On the evening of June 20th, Siegel had dinner with an associate at a nearby restaurant. He returned to the Linden Drive house around 9:30 p.m. He sat on the sofa. He picked up the newspaper. And at 9:45, the shooting began. The Los Angeles Police Department launched a homicide investigation. They interviewed neighbors. They processed the crime scene. They followed leads. But no witnesses came forward. No physical evidence pointed to a specific shooter. The case was never solved. A detective assigned to the case later admitted the obvious.
We knew it was a mob hit. We knew it was ordered from the top. But knowing and proving are different things. Nobody talked. Nobody saw anything. And frankly, nobody in the organization cared if we solved it or not. The message had been sent.
Within an hour of the shooting, the Flamingo was under new management. The transition was seamless. No violence, no confusion. The Syndicate had planned the succession before the trigger was pulled. And the casino, now free from Siegel's expensive vision, began generating consistent profit. The Syndicate's decision to kill Benjamin Siegel was not emotional, it was structural. He had violated the organization's core principle. Money flows up, accountability flows down. He had spent the Syndicate's capital as if it were his own. He had ignored warnings. He had prioritized his vision over their profit, and in an organization built on enforcement, there could be no exceptions. Not even for a founding member. Three years after Siegel's death, the Las Vegas Strip was unrecognizable. The desert inopened, the sands, the Sahara. Each casino followed the blueprint Siegel had sketched: luxury, entertainment, spectacle. But each was built with better management, tighter accounting, Syndicate oversight. The vision had been correct. The execution had been fatal. By 1950, the Flamingo was one of the most profitable casinos in Nevada. The debts were repaid. The Syndicate earned back its investment many times over. The palace Siegel built became exactly what he promised, just not under his name. A historian specializing in Las Vegas development explained the irony.
Bugsy Siegel is credited with inventing modern Las Vegas, and in a sense, he did. He saw what the city could be, but he didn't live long enough to see it happen. The men who killed him became the ones who profited from his vision.
Over the decades, Benjamin Siegel became a mythological figure. Books, films, television shows, each iteration smoothing the edges, romanticizing the violence, framing him as a tragic visionary. The real man, a killer, an enforcer, a syndicate operator, disappeared beneath the Hollywood version. But the documentary record tells a different story. A man who helped build Murder Incorporated, who carried out contract killings, who enforced syndicate discipline without hesitation. A man who believed his charm and vision made him indispensable, and who learned, too late, that in the syndicate's arithmetic, no one is indispensable. Some questions remain unresolved. Did Siegel skim syndicate funds? FBI investigations suggested it but never proved it. Did Virginia Hill know the killing was coming? Her sudden departure suggests awareness, but she never testified. Who pulled the trigger? Multiple names have been suggested, none confirmed. The uncertainties are part of the story. The syndicate continued for decades after Siegel's death. Las Vegas became the most profitable illegal enterprise in American history. The Flamingo, the Sands, the Stardust, each generated millions in revenue. Much of it skimmed, laundered, distributed to syndicate families across the country. The system Siegel helped build outlived him by generations. In the end, Benjamin Siegel's story is not about glamour or vision. It is about the price of ambition within a system that valued loyalty over innovation, profit over personality, discipline over dreams. He built an empire in the desert, but he built it with other people's money. And when he could not deliver their return, the system did what it was designed to do. It removed him. June 20th, 1947. A chintz sofa, a newspaper, shattered glass catching the late afternoon sun. Benjamin Siegel died the way he had lived, violently, suddenly, and on someone else's terms. The Flamingo's neon sign still stands in Las Vegas. His name does not appear on it,